let's begin with roll call, please.
Councillor Moore,
Here.
Councillor Gibbs, Mayor Reed,
Present.
Councillor Barbell,
Here.
Councillor Kelly. He was there. Oh, there he is. Councillor Brody,
Here.
Councillor McFarland.
In the room here, we have for water and sewer, Mr. Ruff, and for DPW, Mr. Brody and Bissett, and Andrew Duran is here as well. I know that Councillor Moore, you had your pre-meeting yesterday and had some questions answered. Is there any additional reports or questions you have for the various department heads present today?
Well, I just wanted to give everyone or them to give an update on Kogan project, and Manager Ruff to give a little update on the water agreement proposal.
If you want to start with John, he's coming up to the podium.
I'll start with the water proposal from CDM Smith. It's an amendment to their existing agreement to provide two basic types of services. One is to start doing the basis of design for the new water well system that we got $3 million in WIA grant money for last year. And the second major task in their agreement is to revise their engineer's report into phases so that we can apply for successive $3 million grants over the next 3 or 4 years to hopefully bring our grant total from 3 million up to 12 or maybe even $15 million. So that's about a $55,000 worth of work. We have the cash already for that work, even if we don't end up getting future grants. And something else to understand too is that regardless of whether we get any more WIA grants, this is work that needs to be done because of the situation at Meade Dam. So we don't have a lot of choice about proceeding. So the good news is there is an infrastructure investment charge that we've been collecting for several years now through the water fund. So we've built a stockpile of cash that can be used towards this. And we've also got annual cash flow coming in towards it.
Thank you, John, for explaining that to the public. I was just wondering if somebody from Public Works would be able to give everyone an update, on how the status of some of our projects due to the hold up on construction that may push some of these things back, like the Kogan Avenue project.
Like we spoke, I think we spoke about it briefly before. Kogan Ave, where we stand now, is still in the design phase. They're hoping end of June, and then you're looking at bid time in the middle to the end of July, which really doesn't give us much time for construction. So we're looking at a 2021 job if we go that route. Other projects that will be ongoing, the Empire State Trail improvement, which includes paving work that's 100% funded, should be done by the middle of this July. We've been in contact with DOT and the people that are coordinating that, and they're pushing to get that done. The PSAP project, which is again is a 100% funded project, we're on schedule to perform that this season and get that completed. As far as our road resurfacing projects, we are currently trying to get a definitive answer from the state of New York where our CHIPS money is, or what our status is, and how, if we're going to get any at all. So we're really waiting on them. We have done our estimates and gotten quotes, and and prepared to proceed with those as necessary, as the money becomes available. Something you'll see on the agenda, if anyone has any questions right now, is Ohio Ave Water Project, which is basically from Nevada to Tennessee. We're looking at a 1,200-foot pipe project, which isn't in the road, just off the edge of the road behind the curb. Last year, we had a catastrophic failure. We had 5 leaks and probably about a 45-foot span, and we had to isolate that section. The good news was we were able to isolate it and not put anyone out of water. The bad news is it basically closed down the looping of that section or that system. We've nursed it along, and unfortunately, we're not going to be able to avoid having to do this work this season. So what we're requesting is the design has been done. We'd like to put it out to bid and get this replaced as quickly as possible.
Well, that's very good. And I think you had told us that that Ohio water project was not going to affect anybody. They won't lose any service out of that.
Yes, that leg is out currently, and it's not putting anyone out. What affects us is if we have a leak, and we have to shut off another section, we're not able to backfeed. It also, there's over time, you should be looping systems for, not only to make sure you don't have water shock, but for the water itself. And John can probably speak better to this. When you have a loop system and water is flowing, you're definitely purification of the water, the purity of the water is better. Water quality is not an issue currently out there, and I don't want anyone to be alarmed, but it's something, like I said, we cannot put this off. It needs to be done.
That sounds good.
All good? Okay.
Very good. Thank you very much. I guess at this time, I'd like to move the following agenda items 1 through 3 to the council floor. Entertain a
second that.
motion. I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I think that's easier roll call here.
Oh,
Counselor Moore,
yes.
Counselor Gibbs,
Yes.
Mayor Reed,
Yes.
I don't have any old business. Does anyone else have any old business?
I do.
I do. There was something, I remember, I think the last time we had the infrastructure meeting, I asked about a camera or a camera looking device on Route 9, just south of Scamotion Creek coming into the city. Did anyone ever discover what that is?
I think Councilor McFarland was addressing that to Mike.
What was that? I'm sorry.
Are we talking about the camera?
Yeah, that camera thing we talked about last time, like no one really had an answer.
I don't have an answer for you. That one's gonna have to go back to Levi. That's not something that belongs to the city. It's gonna either be MLD might be able to give you an answer, Pat, or the police chief Ritter.
Okay. Colin, do you think would it be all right if I reached out to those to Bill and Levi and asked them that?
Can Beth handle that for you? Just work with Beth on that?
Yeah, I'll gladly.
Is it troublesome to someone, Pat, or I mean?
Yeah, a constituent asked me about it, and
Okay.
now I'm kind of curious. But is it a priority? No.
Was there any other old business?
I think you were asking yesterday about CHIPS money and et cetera. Mr. Brody can talk about what he's found out. these are all figures that we will have tomorrow. You can still tell the people you know about this money.
Well, on the New York website about CHIPS money and the A money, City of Plattsburgh for 2021, they have $2,648,000. The paved New York balances for City of Plattsburgh is $80,664. And the CHIPS money for cities is $40 million. What share Plattsburgh get, I don't know. Just want to give you that update. It may be updated tomorrow with the governor and the state of New York, okay?
So there will be funds available for CHIPS?
We believe so, yes.
Oh, great.
Well, we don't know yet. They put out those original budgets with the executive budget a few months ago, but they said that they would reserve taking them back. You know, but I think for AIM, they're going to reconsider it up till tomorrow, and then they're going to make some sort of announcement. We don't have any more information, but he's giving you the figures that that we've been assuming so far, and we'll see if there's any changes to that.
Okay, is there any other old business? If not, is there any new business?
Just one update I want to offer for you. As you know, about a year, maybe 2 years ago, actually 2 years ago, we went out for an RFP for the harbor side. And as you recall, that we didn't have any interested developers at that time. Since then, and one of the reasons was that there was not a lot of clarity on what the wastewater treatment plant would be doing. And there's a lot more clarity on that now. And John's done a lot since then. So I think I'm prepared to reissue an RFP for people, see if there's any interest in doing anything down there now and have that kind of gel into the harbor side plan and all that kind of stuff. That's just an announcement at this point. Obviously, you'd be more involved if there's any interest in contracting, etc. But I do intend to reissue the RFP to attract a developer to the Dock Street site near the lakefront that we originally released in 2018. There's a lot of interest at that time. The city was contacted by multiple developers, but no proposals were ultimately submitted, mainly because of concerns over the wastewater treatment plant. But based on the ongoing mitigations, we're intending to address those concerns and upgrade the plant's operations and reissue that RFP at this time. So we'll keep you posted on that. We'll probably do that process over the next few weeks, or maybe have something positive to report to you toward mid to end of June.
Very good. Was there any other new business?
I didn't see you there, Matt. Matt has been keeping the stuff to read, so thank you.
If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Roll call.
Counselor Moore,
Yes.
Counselor Gibbs,
Yes.
Mayor Reed,
Yes. So we can begin our work session for tonight as well. You've got your agenda packets with you, and I did send around a few moments ago other questions that Councilman Farland had asked. I don't know if you had a chance to digest them. There's a couple of spreadsheets and some comments that Ethan and Matt have prepared on where our various grants are and outlining some of the COVID-19 grants that we may consider as well. So if there's no more comments on that, we can have more discussion on that next week if you prefer. But we can spend some time talking about any items on the agenda tonight. And I know that we've asked for a special presentation from the Finance Committee every week. Councillor Kelly is, I think, prepared to give us an update on that if you would like at this time.
That's
Okay.
awesome. Thank you. I haven't gotten a chance to look at that, but I did see that you sent me that email, so I'll take a look and be happy to discuss next week.
Perfect, thanks.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen with you. Give me just a minute. Okay, I hope everyone can see that. I also emailed it in case you can't. So this is our weekly budget update of 5/14/2020. I hope everybody can hear me. There's a little echo in this room. Today's agenda is this week's frequently asked questions, an AIM update, and our sales tax update. I always like to start with our budget assumptions. Our budget assumptions are being challenged this year. So in terms of cost and value, I'd like for everyone to think about how the city can continue to deliver our services in this new economic reality, and always ask the question, what is essential? That should be foremost in our minds. Structural balance, this is going to be challenging in 2020 and 2021. We're determined not to spend down the general fund balance below 1.5 million. And this rainy day fund must be available for unexpected expenses. And also, as you all know, we self-fund our health care. So we need to keep money available to pay for any catastrophic healthcare issues. We certainly hope those don't happen, but we have to be ready in case they do. Unassigned fund balance growth. This may be on hold also in 2020, but I think we can include plans to resume course in 2021, conditions permitting. Finally, sustainability. One thing I want to say about all this is that it's really, really challenging right now, but we're going to get back on track. And you just have to have faith that that's going to happen. And I believe we're doing all the right things. We were sort of already planning to have a very large tax decrease in 2021. So that's going to help us in terms of balancing our budget going forward. That tax decrease may not be as large as we had hoped, but we're going to strive for that anyway.
Mike,
So
can I ask a question?
Sure.
So in this this frame that you have broadcast right here, says increased assessments will lead the city to lower the tax rate. This is not the time to ask taxpayers to pay more. So can you explain that a little bit? Like how would we do that? I know we did this last year.
Yeah.
How do we go about doing that?
Well,
Does that sound like a silly question? I hope not.
no, it's not a silly question, and it's a very good question. I'm glad you asked it, Elizabeth. Last year, the tax levy increased by 4%, and that was largely due to reassessments. So in order to address those reassessments and deliver the taxpayers a good tax rate for 2020, we actually reduced the tax rate by 5%. So we addressed a 4% increase in the levy by a 5% decrease in taxes. So that means on the average, everyone's got a minus 1% tax increase, or I should say a 1% tax decrease. So this year, we will soon learn what the tax levy is for the city. And as soon as we do learn that, and it should be probably about the end of this month, I would guess, we can craft a budget that will deliver a lower tax rate than the assessment. So in essence, our taxpayers are getting slightly lower tax bills next year. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. I also have another question when you're finished with this.
Okay.
So I'll raise it when you're finished, but it has to do with a constituent contacting me with what I perceive as something like an outrageous rumor that I thought would be very important to address here, so that in the public they can hear the answer. So I'll wait until you're done and then I'll ask. Okay?
Yeah, that's what, I'm glad about that too, Elizabeth. That's what we're here for, is to deliver the truth to our citizens and, not let rumors swirl around unanswered. This slide right here is actually an example of that. I've heard a rumor that we're going to have a 30% tax increase, but that is just simply not true. Our goal is a 0% tax increase in 2021 or lower. As I said, we want to address the increased assessments with a tax reduction. I'm going to move on to the next slide. Another frequently asked question is, isn't the tax rate a shell game if the property assessments are going up? Well, the answer is it can be. It depends on what local governments do with the increased county assessments. As I said before, last year, we reduced taxes to address the increased tax assessments and tax bills. So for 2020, as I mentioned, this is incorrect here. The assessor's office did not raise city property assessments. That's a little bit of a misnomer. The correct thing to say is the tax levy went up by 4%. So the city responded, as I said, with lowering the tax rate by 5%. So we find this year that county assessor's office is, raising our assessments again this year for many people. So we'll match that with another tax decrease this year. I will add one warning, however, that a worsening economy could change everything. So we just constantly have to watch our revenues and make sure they match our expenses. So, that's basically what we do all the time. It's just a little more challenging right now.
Yeah, and I will know, Mike, like if your assessment goes up more than the average, then your tax bill
Yes.
could possibly go up, just like if your assessment goes up a little less than the average, or what the average is, what the tax rate decrease is,
Yeah,
then taxes will go down.
let's take that 1% tax decrease that we had last year as an example. If your rate of assessment went up by 7% or 8% or 15% last year, that tax decrease doesn't really help you as much as the guy who's below the average. So you're absolutely right about that, and it's definitely a concern. I'm not sure what to do about that, except maybe prevail on the county to help us out with that. Be very cautious with reassessments at this time. Everybody's challenged by the COVID-19 pandemic, as you know, and we just need to do everything we can to help our citizens, our taxpayers. Okay, so I'm going to go on to the next frequently asked question, and actually I'd like to ask maybe Jeff and Ira if they could chime in and help me out with this. They both know more about this than I do. But the issues for opening the beach are staffing, health concerns, how do we finance opening? And the city, just want to let you know, the city's reached out to some other municipalities and nonprofits to seek help. So, Jeff, do you have anything to add?
Mike, this is Ira. I don't have a lot to add. I think those are the key issues. Okay. That the financial concerns, I think, are a primary disincentive to opening the gym at this point, along with the health concerns. And they both weigh heavily on any decision that we're gonna make. So I think you've hit the highlights. The details, I think, are yet to be figured out on that. But it does not look like that we're going to have an early opening of the beach. And if we go too far into it, it doesn't make sense if it's only going to be open for 3 or 4 weeks. to do all the upfront costs and prep work that's necessary. Many of those things take, as I don't know if it was last week that Mr. Miller from the Community Director of Community Development pointed out that there's almost 3 months worth of effort that's necessary in preparation and development to get the beach opened if the city were going to open it. We're still exploring, as you indicated on this, potential for perhaps a contract or a partnership of some sort with another entity that actually might be able to reduce some of the costs to open the beach and make that happen. But that's still very much up in the air at this point.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, I had trouble getting unmuted here, but another roadblock that could develop is Canadians are probably we did a survey last year and Canadians were the majority of customers at the beach. And if they don't open the border up there, that would severely curtail the amount of money that we would have to open back up also. So we're just keeping an eye on that to see where that ends up.
I think yesterday's announced that the border would remain closed to discretionary travel till June 21st of this year.
Until when, Mayor?
June 21st?
Of June?
Yeah, 21st of June.
Yeah, I think people should realize that Montreal is the hot spot for the entire country of Canada. So I think that we should exercise a lot of caution opening that border to come down to Plattsburgh.
Yeah, and if I could chime in here, go back to your earlier slide here, Mike, about a worsening economy could change everything. Well, the reason why our infection rate hasn't, well, I know it is high, but I mean, the reason it's not higher than it is because we acted early to take measures and we're maintaining social distancing and so forth. If we don't continue to exercise extreme caution in the way we interact, we're going to see a rise in cases and we'll be right back to where we were, let's say in March. Everybody, frozen in place. So that's really important to understand here. When people are out and about and, they're ordering takeout or they're congregating together, have to keep that in mind that we want the economy to recover, then we have to maintain the cautions that we have in order to maintain our personal health.
Yes, you're right, Elizabeth. Challenging times for sure. The governor's given us great guidelines though, to open in phases. And if regions will do what the governor recommends, I think it'll be okay. He's basing all this on the science. So I'm willing to give it a try. If we're successful and we can open, I think they're calling it phase 1 at this point or soon, then that would be a good start. Hopeful that will happen. So the next frequently asked question is, why don't you use those DRI millions to fund city operations? And we all know that this is a somewhat silly question, but it's asked, so we should address it. Grant monies are earmarked for specific projects. And the grantor decides what happens with grant funds, not the grantee. So we can't arbitrarily change what the dollars are used for. And right now, the state has a clampdown on all awards. There are no more grants currently. And I would guess that today, New York State is just not in a mood to renegotiate grant funds. And you really can't blame them given the state's financial condition. Okay, so here are the projections as of today. we hope, we hope that AIM does not drop by 50%, but that's a projection by the New York State Association of Counties. County sales tax likewise will be reduced by 28%. So that's a $1.2 million loss. Property tax collections are normal so far, according to our city chamberlain. So that is very good news. And an expected $688,000 surplus we were counting on this year will not materialize, but and $600,000 of our fund balance will be expended. So those are actually counted as positives in the balance sheet. So that's $1.3 million. So we're going to lose $1.1 million on events, licenses, permits, and recreation fees. So the net loss today is minus 2.8 million that we're looking at by the end of the year. So we have to continue to address this shortfall and make that number zero by the end of the year. And you know, some of that's already happening. Many of our facilities are closed. Some of our employees are on furlough right now. So we just have to keep thinking of creative ways to balance our budget at the end of the year.
Mike, can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Well, just on the previous slide, you ended it with saying New York State's probably in no mood to renegotiate grant funds.
Yes.
And we keep hearing over and over that with DRI, if it doesn't go forward with approval from planning board and the zoning boards, that essentially we could take the DRI monies and we could move them into another project, maybe a smaller development initiative on the Durkee Street site. Have you gotten any information from New York State that that's a potential option for us with the DRI funds?
Mayor, would you like to address that question? I believe the mayor knows a little more about this than I do.
I think they've resoundingly said that their contract is currently with Prime, and that they wouldn't be doing any recontracting, that they fulfill the responsibilities they've made so far to anybody they've contracted with, but they will not be doing any recontracting given this budget environment.
So you're saying that if it doesn't go through the zoning and planning board, that the project is dead and the money will be returned to the state?
Well, the money still resides with the state. They've never.
Okay, but that the money, we wouldn't be able to use the money on another project then?
Certainly, we wouldn't at all, because the money was never going to pass through us. The only relationship is between Prime and the state at this point. And in this budget environment, we understand, everybody understands that the state will not be negotiating any further contracts with any other entities at this time.
Thank you.
Could I add something here too? There's a big misconception that people have that there's grant money changes hands. Grant money only changes hands when a project is completed. You have to spend the money first and then they reimburse you. There is no payment, or there's no money lying out there that has our name on it. It's a reimbursement for money spent. So there's no actual money in any account that's that's spendable at this point. They only award that after a project is completed. And as we know, some of the money that we have spent already on projects, we are still waiting for money back on it. So it's not an instant thing. It takes a while for that money to come back home. So in the meantime, you're holding out, waiting for that money you've already spent. So there is no, money changing hands like people think. It's a reimbursement for things done.
And that's consistent with the question Councilor McFarland asked earlier with regard to the status of our various grants. The city has actually fronted many millions of dollars at this point to seed projects for the DRI that are in various stages of completion. Should those projects not be completed, the city would be likely not reimbursed for those funds. And those projects are being held up under the generic term DRI, whether they are involving Durkee Street or not.
Yeah, I think those are all very important distinctions because you see letters to the editor or comments in the Press Republican or people out in the community who think that we have this $4 million or more in our city funds and that we have the ability to turn around and bail out downtown businesses. I've heard that repeated many times in the community. Why can't we just take this money and bail out our downtown businesses? And over and over again, I think we need to just continue with this message that money doesn't belong to the city and we are not in possession of it. And that is not the way grant money works. Grant money is allocated for a specific purpose, and it doesn't come to us. It goes between the grant office and the whatever organization it's dealing with or company. And that's really important.
Unfortunately, Plattsburgh has a history of turning its back on lucrative projects. I remember the Bove project in the old Cumberland Hotel site on Court Street and Margaret Street. It was planned to be multi-story housing and retail built there several years ago, and there was such an uproar about it that it didn't happen. On the other hand, one of the great projects that did happen, and I apologize for getting way off track here, but I wanted to share this with you. One of the projects that did successfully complete was the first phase of the Saranac River Trail. And that was met with tremendous opposition at first also, but somehow we got through it and the project was completed. And today, I don't think you can find anyone really who's opposed to that project. It turned out to be a huge success. And I think the same thing is true of the Prime project. I think it's something that people forget is that it has to be a win for everyone. It has to be a win for the community, it has to be a win for the city, and it has to be a win for Prime. And they're not going to build something there if they can't make a profit on it. And that's a fact. Any developer would tell you the same thing.
It has to be a win for the state too, because they're putting the $10 million in. We have 4 more minutes left, by the way, before our council meeting begins.
Yes, yeah, we're done here. Elizabeth has a question.
Yes, I do. I received a phone call from a constituent yesterday. There is some wild rumor going around that our budget situation in the city government is not the $3 million that we had identified roughly more than a month ago now, but that our finances are actually $7 million short. And I said, well, I'm sure that's not the case. So Mike and Jeff, could you respond to that?
Sure, Elizabeth. I'll let Mike speak after me, but that's our best projections at this time, and we really did do our best to compile what we feel is what's going to happen with our funding from the state and our revenues. So it's of course it's a guess, but it's a best guess. We've worked hard to come up with a good number, and I can assure you, at least at the present time, it's nowhere near 7 million. I think what Mike just laid out is pretty much correct, given the present circumstances. Who knows what may happen later, but it's I would say it's a very accurate estimate.
That's what I said too. I have absolute faith in you guys with the way that you keep your eye on the income and the spreadsheets and all of that. And so I thought it would be a good idea to address it right now and get the answer out in the public.
What they could be referring to is that if we lose, have a shortfall of $3 million through the remainder of the year, and that's even drawing down the general fund to 1.5 million, et cetera, the fund balance, et cetera, as the councilor said. But if we expect to make that up somehow in the same fiscal year, with only half a year left to do so, it requires an equivalent of a savings of about $7 million annualized over 3 months or over 6 months to get 3.5 million over 12 months. So maybe where they're coming up with the number. If you understand what I'm saying.
I don't have anything to add, so we can close our discussion for today and go on to the regular council meeting. I hope that answered your question, Elizabeth.
Yes, it did actually. You know, the perspective and understanding how you're arriving at the number, and the mayor's further explanation is very helpful too. So thank you.
You're quite welcome.
Can I entertain any reports at this time? We've got about a minute. Well, no, there's 5 o'clock. So let's begin our council meeting tonight with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of
America, the republic stands one nation under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Reed, Councilor Barbell,
Here.
Councilor Kelly,
Here.
Councilor Gibbs,
Here,
Councilor Brody,
Here.
Councilor McFarland,
Here.
Councilor Moore.
Here,
I've got a short proclamation for you. Whereas we commend the brave men and women of our law enforcement community for continually summoning the courage to fulfill their solemn oath and protect and serve. And whereas we also pause to remember all those who have lost their lives and have suffered permanent disabilities defending their communities and the rule of law, including the heroes we have lost this year to the coronavirus. Whereas law enforcement officials have never wavered in the face of a crisis or tragedy. And whereas during uncertain times, law enforcement officers bravely face challenges and continue to protect the American people. And whereas they steadfastly ensure the safety of our communities, providing a much needed sense of security for our citizens, and our country is extremely grateful for their efforts. Whereas we must continue working toward a time when all people respect and understand the important work the law enforcement officers do. And whereas their ability to work well in the face challenges is extraordinary, and we have incredible appreciation for the public service and selflessness. Therefore, do I, Colin Reed, Mayor of the City of Plattsburgh, proclaim May 15, 2020 as Peace Office Memorial Day, and May 10th through 16th, 2020 as Police Week in honor of our hardworking law enforcement officers. Thank you. Please continue.
Resolved that the minutes of the regular meeting of the Common Council held on May 7th, 2020 are approved and placed on file among the public records of the city clerk's office.
Moved by Councilor Kelly and seconded by Councilor Gibbs. Discussion? All in favor?
aye.
Opposed? Passed.
Resolved that the payrolls of the various departments of the city of Plattsburgh for the week ending May 13th, 2020 in the amount of $54,812.22 are authorized and allowed, and the mayor and the city clerk are hereby empowered and directed to sign warrants drawn on the city chamberlain for the payment thereof.
Moved by Councilor Gibbs and seconded by Councilor Moore. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Passed. You have in your packet your various reports for the week. Can I have any additional reports beginning with governance strategy, city operations, Councilor Barbell?
Nothing to report at this time.
City infrastructure, Councilor Moore.
we just had our meeting and I don't have anything additional at this time.
Finance and budget, Councilor Kelly.
Nothing to add at this time, Mayor.
Public safety, Councilor Gibbs.
Yeah, so we have a scheduled meeting with Chief Lawless next week to talk about various concerns and get some updates on ambulance costs, revenue, overtime, and so on.
Thank you. And Public Library, Councilor McFarland.
No update.
MLD, Councilor McFarland.
Also, no update.
Resolved, reports as listed are hereby received. Any written reports are placed on file on public records of the city clerk's office. Moved by Councilor Gibbs and second by Councilor Barbell. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. No correspondence or recommendation from boards at this time. Please continue.
Resolved that the bills audited by the Common Council for the week ending May 15th, 2020, in the amount of $627,702.05 are authorized and allowed, and the mayor and the city clerk are hereby authorized and directed to sign warrants drawn on the city chamberlain for the payment thereof.
Moved by Councilor Gibbs and second by Councilor Kelly. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. There's no persons in person here to address the council, although I appreciate everybody keeping their masks on and safe distance here today. Are there any comments that need to be read in, Beth?
No.
Okay, seeing none, please continue.
Resolved in accordance with the request, therefore the Common Council approves that the mayor be authorized to sign an addendum to the city's DRI Streetscape and Riverfront Access Project contract with Saratoga Associates to reallocate budgeted fees within that contract from construction inspection to preliminary and final design to address scope changes realized since the start of the project.
Moved by Councilor Gibbs and second by Councilor Moore. Discussion. Mr. Miller is on hand if you have any questions for him. Seeing none, roll call.
Councilor Barbell?
Yes.
Councilor Kelly?
Yes.
Councilor Gibbs?
Yes.
Councilor Brody?
Yes.
Councilor McFarland?
Still
Councilor
muted.
McFarland? You can raise your hand.
Yes. Did that
Councilor Moore?
Yes.
Resolved in accordance with the request, therefore the Common Council agrees to and authorizes the execution of Amendment 1 to CDM Smith's Water WIIA agreement per their April 22nd, 2020 proposal. The amendment will be on a time and expense basis not to exceed $55,000, increasing their upper limit from $26,100 to $81,100.
Moved by Councilor Moore, second by Councilor Gibbs. Discussion. Roll call.
Councilor Barbell?
Yes.
Councilor Kelly?
Yes.
Councilor Gibbs?
Yes.
Councilor Brody?
Yes.
Councilor McFarland?
Yes.
Councilor Moore?
Yes.
Resolved in accordance with the request, therefore the Common Council authorizes the Department of Public Works to advertise for bids for Ohio Avenue Water Line Replacement Project.
Moved by Councilor Gibbs, second by Councilor Moore. Discussion. And thank you for that explanation we had in this pre-meeting. Roll call.
Councilor Barbell?
Yes.
Councilor Kelly?
Yes.
Councilor Gibbs?
Yes.
Councilor Brody?
Yes.
Councilor McFarland?
Yes, please.
Councilor Moore?
Yes.
No travel requests at this time. Are there any resolutions for initial consideration? For new business and council reports, so Mr. Miller's here. Would you be able to update the council a little bit on the Saranac River Trail? I know there's recent developments on that.
So as the council knows, the city released a bid specification for phase 2 of the Saranac River Trail About a month and a half ago, we received those bid results at the end of April. They were analyzed by the city's consulting engineer, Stantec, and were presented to the city last week. The previously approved construction budget that the council had okayed at some point last year was approximately $2.5 million. That's for the just for the construction phase of the project. The lowest bid that we received in response to the bid spec, and we received 4 bids, the lowest bid was approximately $3.2 million. That means that an additional $700,000 would have to be allocated from the council to this project in order to facilitate its construction in its current form. Clearly, with the financial circumstances that the city's operating under, that is a tough sell. That would be a tough sell at any time, but particularly now. So I've been having discussions with Stantec and the Department of Transportation about whether they would approve a reduction in scope that would allow the city to remove some of the less essential items from the bids in the hopes of bringing that low bid down to around what the council had originally approved, $2.5 million. Based on an initial review, they believe that they can remove approximately $450,000 to $500,000 in work items from the scope, which would bring the construction budget down to around 2.7. Now that would still require the council to allocate an additional $200,000 to the project in order to get it done. I would also have to make sure that any reductions in scope do not run afoul of regulations imposed by the Department of Transportation, the federal funding that is attached to the project, the $500,000 parks grant that is attached to the project, or anything else that might come up, and also the DEC's soil erosion plan, which was also part of the approval. So any reductions in scope would have to be approved by all of those agencies, and I'm in contact with them, but I don't have final answers. But in any case, I would need the mayor and the council's approval in order to submit a revised, reduced scope for that project to the various agencies for their review and approval before we could approve a bid in that amount and then work with the contractor to reduce the scope accordingly.
When would you need any action on that, Mr. Miller?
The $500,000 parks grant, I know had initially an expiration date of this year. We had requested a year-long extension in order to get us to what we had hoped to be completion next year. We would have to discuss with them probably an additional extension if the council decides not to move forward this season. I have a call into DOT about the $1.4 million in federal funding. I'm still waiting on clarification from that.
So no action right now, but you may need some guidance pretty soon, is what you're saying?
I would say within the next month or two, I would need an answer about, whether the council would like to move forward or not in order to make sure the funding is in place.
And I want everybody to understand this is a project that Mr. Miller inherited. This is nothing to do with his estimation or any of the engineering he might have had done. This was kind of a legacy that we were left with. And I think some of the council have been worried about that estimating and that design work for many years. So this is the culmination of that, where Mr. Miller is really trying to look for a path to get a concept that we all like, but seems to have been flawed some of the design work through to a point of completion.
Yeah, the feedback that I've received from DOT is that the federal funding requires continuity from one end of the project to another. So the city could not simply contract to have the bridges installed with nothing in between them. There has to be a clear path from one end of the project footprint to the other, which limits what we can remove, and which also limits the amount of money that we can take out of the scope. And just to provide some additional context for the council, reviewing the project records to date since 2014, between right-of-way acquisition, design work on various phases, and the removal of the Saranac Street Bridge, the city has expended approximately $600,000 on this project.
I have a question.
Yeah, Mike.
is it possible just to do half the project currently and then go back and do the other half sometime in the future?
The feedback from DOT is that if we're going to move forward, continuity has to be maintained. So we could not do half now and then half at some indefinite point in the future. It would have to have a solid path from one end to the other.
Director Miller, can you repeat what you said before Councilor Kelly asked this question? Something about 600,000.
Yeah, this project was started in 2014. Between the design costs and the right-of-way acquisitions and the demolition cost involved with the Saranac Street Bridge, the old Saranac Street Bridge, the city has to date expended approximately $600,000 on this project.
And now the city already has put away the $2.5 million. Is that correct, for the finishing the project? That was for the estimate of finishing the project?
Yeah, based on the most recent engineer's estimate, the council had allocated enough funding to cover a construction cost of roughly $2.5 million. And the low bid came in at $3.2 million.
And best guess at even getting rid of as much as we can, we're still looking at 200,000 over that.
That's correct.
And that doesn't include any unforeseen cost increases once construction starts.
That is also correct.
What is it that they're taking out of the project to take out and bring that down to 2.7?
A lot of it has to do with aesthetic improvements and also certain implements to affect the DEC's requirements for soil erosion around the riverbank. So it's a mix of things. Some of them there are no critical engineering elements that are being removed. It's simply things to make the trail a more pleasant experience for people to walk on. But all of the critical, tangible engineering elements are remaining.
So to summarize, if you're able to do that renegotiation, it would cost the city about 200,000 more than assumed. On the other hand, but then you have at least a workable trail, which we could then improve in the future. Or if we don't continue, the city's already sunk $600,000 into it and has nothing to show.
And the city would also likely forfeit the $500,000 in parks money plus the $1.4 million in federal funding, which it would be unlikely we would get back in the future.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch which would what?
Yeah, so the current funding structure for the project, there is approximately $1.4 million in federal funding through the DOT. There's $500,000 through a New York State Parks grant. So that's $1.9 million to cover right now what is a construction cost of $3.2 million. So if the city were to not move forward at this time, it is likely, considering the anticipated fallout from COVID, that the $500,000 parks grant would no longer be available to the city, and the $1.4 million in federal funding may also not be available. So if the city did decide to move forward at some point in the future, unless additional grant funding from other sources was able to be cobbled together, the city would be on the hook for the entire cost of the construction.
But if we didn't move forward, we have 2.5 million to spend on something else. Is that what I'm getting?
No, because there hasn't been any money spent. So it would essentially be $2.5 million. So we've got $1.9 million in grant funding. Anything on top of that would be out of the city's pocket. If we can get the construction cost down to $2.7 million, that's essentially an $800,000 cost out of the city's pocket that would have to go on the books.
I have a question.
Yes.
And a comment. I think this is awful risky at this time. I think, I love the concept of the two bridges linking my ward, Ward 2, to downtown. That's fantastic. I think that's going to help my ward when that happens. But for now, this proposition seems really risky, and I don't know that we should enter into it at this point. If we can work an alternate plan that keeps it under budget or at budget, I'd be okay with it, I think, because we've already put some of the money aside, and we certainly don't want to lose those grants. But this also gets back to the point where, we're adding infrastructure without any plan for maintenance. And of course, that always falls to DPW, and I'd just as soon not build bridges if we can't take care of them. And bridges, as you know, are expensive to maintain. So let's think really hard about this before we move forward. It might be possible, for example, to build a path from the current Saranac River Trail to downtown without using any bridges. That'd be a huge savings. And, Pine Street is a little narrow there as you go from, say, around the police station up to Margaret Street, Broad Street, but that might be a possibility. Just if we can figure out a way to widen that a little bit to include a path, why not? It's still right alongside the river, and there might be tremendous savings to be had from doing that. I'd like for the council to consider ideas like that, and you too, Matt, as our community development director. What can we do that's under budget, affordable, but yet provides the amenity that we'd like, and hopefully without a lot of maintenance after. So.
I think the only request that I would make of the council at this point would be to get their approval to work with the various agencies involved to determine how much we can strip out of the scope of work while still satisfying all of the funding requirements, and then come back to the council with a revised budget to see if it is something that you are willing to move forward with or not. Submitting the adjusted scope does not commit the council to spending any money, but it does leave the option open.
I just don't see us expending any more money than we've already put into this. I mean, if we can't do it, there's no shame in walking away. But maybe there's also a middle ground there. Maybe we can find a way to do it that's not as expensive. Maybe just one bridge instead of two, or as I said before, or maybe, as I said, have it go along Pine Street up to Margaret. You're downtown then, and you can easily route yourself back to the river if you want to stay by the river. So just a thought.
Well, how about if we give to Mr. Miller a little latitude to explore some options here anyway?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I like that too.
Me too. Let's move forward and see what you can find out.
Okay, thank you very much.
One other piece of new business might involve Matt. I heard a rumor that the city had built a chain link fence along the Saranac River. He's obviously dispelled that rumor too.
Yeah. The chain link fence that was put up along the eastern edge of the Durkee Street parking lot this week, and also the fence that was put up around the perimeter of the Broad Street parking lot, that was not put up by the city. That does not have anything to do with any planned city construction projects. That was put up by NYSEG in anticipation of their commencement of in-river work, start of their remediation that will get into the river this summer and then proceed down towards the mouth of the Saranac over the next 2 years.
Oh, why do they need a chain link fence for that, and how long is it going to be there?
It's going to be there, at least the one on Durkee Street and Broad Street will be there likely for the remainder of the 2020 season. They're doing all of their work along that portion of the river, hopefully, if the weather cooperates this summer. And it's strictly to, prevent people from, it's going to be interesting work to watch. They don't want anybody falling down the bank into the river, which is why they put up the fence. It's a safety issue.
Is there a history of people falling down that bank into the river?
No, but considering the amount of work they're going to be doing down there, people are going to have a great deal of interest, we expect. So it's just a practical matter to put up a fence. No, that's a good point.
I'm sorry, was someone else just talking?
No, it's okay. Is there any other new business or additional council reports this time?
I'd like to raise an issue, and when Mike was going through his report, talked about the potential of expanded costs. That's always there with our self-funded healthcare program. And I would like, not at this time, but in a future meeting to get a cost for what is it costing us on an annual basis for a self-funded healthcare system. And then to consider the possibility of using the, we have a management company that's handling claims that come in for us to potentially see if they would work with us to bid, get bids on operating and putting in a healthcare insurance program in the city to compare what those bids would be with what we're currently paying and our average over the last few years.
Yep, you can work with me on
My agenda for next week to answer your first question, Ira. You know, what is this costing us currently? But that's a good question about exploring other options, and I certainly wouldn't mind doing that.
And we've done that periodically. I think we've done it at least once since I've been here. Our management consultant company is really adept at those kinds of analyses, so we can go through that exercise again. I will let you know, people wonder about what COVID-19 does to our healthcare expenses, and it's kind of complicated. On the one hand, a lot of people aren't getting the regular procedures done right now because the hospital isn't taking elective surgery. So in that dimension, our costs have gone down, but we believe that there's going to be a rush of getting all this backlog done once the hospital opens up fully again, which I think is on Monday. So I think those temporary savings were just transient. The other thing we have to deal with is as we bring our people back to work and there's new protocols as part of the different phases of bringing government back to work, we may need to do testing. Now, I heard a comment from one of our employees that testing is free. And I think what he meant was testing was free to him. But since we're self-insured, every test that gets done is being paid for by the taxpayers. So we're trying to work out an arrangement with the county or the hospital to have COVID-19 either antibody or diagnostic testing done in a way where we could administer it at a much lower cost to our employees. So every time we think of something being free, it may be free to an individual employee, but it's not free to the system. And we don't have a pool of a bunch of other employees from other counties to blend those costs together. They're all borne dollar for dollar by our taxpayers. So we're looking for novel ways to deal with the COVID-19 expenses that are kind of unusual. Nobody else around here is self-insured. And that might be probably stimulates Ira's questions as well. Well, nobody's self-insured around here. Well, why are we the only ones?
Why are we?
Yeah. But so we need more discussion on that, and certainly I can draw you two in if you're interested, and we can have a meeting with our benefits consultant. He's very, very good.
I would appreciate that.
Okay. Any other new business or council reports?
I just like to welcome our newest counselor, Steve Brody, and look forward to working with him in the future.
Thank you.
I kept looking to him to see if he wanted to first or second anything tonight. Kind of low key tonight, but I'm sure he'll be right in there by next week. So, if there's no other new business or council reports, are there any closing public comments? No members of the public here. Kath, do you have anything yet?
None.
Seeing none, do I have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Councillor Gibbs, second by Councillor Barbell. Roll call.
Councilor Barbell?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly,
Yes.
Counselor Gibbs,
Yes.
Counselor Brody,
Yes.
Counselor McFarland,
Yes.
Counselor Moore.
Yes.
Well, thank you all. See you all again next week. Not earlier.